Good evening, friends. Tonight, we embark on a journey together, a soft, quiet journey through time. Picture yourself nestled beneath a warm, cozy blanket, your body relaxed, your mind floating free as you listen to my voice guide you into the distant past. Dim your lights and let the calm embrace of the evening wash over you. The only thing you need to do right now is breathe deeply and let go of the day. If this journey helps you unwind, tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. Imagine yourself lying under the vast star-strewn sky where the desert meets the horizon. The air is cool and still, and the night carries with it a soft hum. The world around you is quiet, save for the distant sounds of the desert. Perhaps the soft calls of a few birds or the subtle rustle of wind moving through the dunes. You can feel the slight pressure of the sand beneath you, cool to the touch, and the sensation of the wind brushing across your skin. This is the world of the Bedouins, a place far removed from the chaos of modern life, where the rhythm of time moves slowly, like the steady flow of a desert breeze. The Bedouins are a people born of the land, their lives intricately tied to the desert's shifting sands, its unforgiving sun, and its elusive oases. But what if I told you that these desert-dwelling nomads, so often viewed as humble travelers and guardians of ancient traditions, played a pivotal role in one of the largest conflicts in world history, World War I? Yes, the Bedouins. They were far from mere bystanders in the war that shaped the 20th century. In fact, their involvement in the Great War is both surprising and significant, marked by the complexities of alliances, betrayals, and unforeseen partnerships. Let me tell you a little more about them. The Bedouins, whose ancestors had roamed the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula for centuries, were no strangers to hardship. Their lives were rooted in survival, in their ability to navigate the vast and often hostile landscapes of the desert, with its blistering heat by day and freezing cold by night. Their families had mastered the art of living off the land, understanding every subtle change in the terrain, every potential danger, and every hidden oasis. To the British, in the midst of the First World War, the Bedouins seemed like an untapped resource, a group of skilled desert fighters, fiercely independent and yet vulnerable to the changing tides of political forces. The Ottomans, who controlled much of the Arabian Peninsula, had aligned themselves with the Central Powers. The British, battling on multiple fronts in Europe, saw an opportunity to turn the tide in their favor by reaching out to the Bedouins, who had long harbored resentment against the Ottomans for their heavy-handed rule. And so, the British made their move. Picture this scene, if you will. The year is 1916. The First World War is raging across Europe, but the Middle East remains a key battleground. The Ottoman Empire, which had once controlled vast swaths of territory, was now crumbling under the weight of the war. It was here, amidst the heat of the desert, that the British found themselves in desperate need of allies. They needed someone who knew the land, someone who could help them navigate the harsh, unforgiving terrain of the Arabian Peninsula, where vast stretches of desert could swallow entire armies. Enter T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, as he would come to be known. Lawrence was a British intelligence officer with a deep respect for the Bedouins, their culture, and their way of life. Having spent time in the region before the war, he understood that the key to defeating the Ottomans might not lie in traditional warfare. Instead, it might be found in the hands of those who knew the desert better than anyone else. Imagine the moment when Lawrence first encountered the Bedouins in person. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand, and the air was thick with dust. Lawrence, a man of both British and Arab descent, had spent years learning the ways of the desert people, their language, and their customs. He knew that he needed to gain their trust if he hoped to form an alliance that would change the course of the war. At first, the Bedouins were skeptical. After all, they were fiercely independent people who had spent centuries living outside the control of any empire. The British, with their foreign ways and promises of grand rewards, seemed just another outside force trying to impose its will on the desert. But Lawrence, with his deep understanding of the Bedouin way of life, was different from the others. His respect for their culture was evident, and slowly but surely he gained their trust. It wasn't just his knowledge of the desert that won them over. It was his ability to see them as equals, not as tools to be used in a foreign war. Over time, Lawrence forged a bond with the Bedouins, and together they began to formulate a plan to drive the Ottomans out of Arabia. The Bedouins were not just fighters, they were masters of the desert, able to navigate its vast expanse with ease. Their mobility, their intimate knowledge of the land, and their ability to disappear into the vast dunes made them invaluable to the British. But it wasn't just about military strategy. It was about something deeper. The Bedouins, despite their independent nature, had a deep sense of loyalty to their people and their land. They weren't simply mercenaries. They were fighting for their own freedom, for their own future. Picture Lawrence and the Bedouins riding side by side across the desert, the steady thud of camel hooves in the sand, the scent of dry earth in the air, and the feeling of the endless sky above. The desert is both a beautiful and dangerous place. The sun beats down during the day, and the nights are bitterly cold. It can be a place of solace, but also of isolation and despair. And yet, amid this harsh landscape, the Bedouins were in their element. The British, guided by Lawrence and the Bedouins, launched a series of daring raids against Ottoman supply lines. They attacked with speed and precision, disappearing into the desert before the Ottomans even knew what had hit them. It wasn't traditional warfare with large armies and heavy artillery. Instead, it was a war of stealth, of hitting fast and then vanishing back into the sands. But this alliance wasn't just about warfare. It was about survival, about forging connections that crossed cultural and political boundaries. The Bedouins, despite their initial distrust of the British, began to see that they could not defeat the Ottomans on their own. The Ottomans were a powerful enemy, and it would take more than just the desert tribes to overcome them. And so, together, Lawrence and the Bedouins fought on, using the desert as their greatest ally. The British, for their part, provided the Bedouins with the weapons and resources they needed to continue their fight. But the true strength lay in the bond between them, the deep respect and understanding that transcended national borders. But the desert, as you may know, is not a place that forgives easily. The further they pushed into Ottoman territory, the greater the challenges became. The British, ever eager for a quick resolution to the conflict, began to push the Bedouins harder. The promises of independence, made in the heat of battle, began to feel less certain with each passing day, and soon the cracks in the alliance began to show. As we settle deeper into this journey, imagine the tension in the air, the heat of the day, the coolness of the night, and the shifting sands that seem to mirror the uncertainty of the war. The Bedouins had become central figures in a global conflict, but their future remained uncertain. What would become of them once the war was over? Would they receive the independence they had been promised, or would they find themselves once again lost in the winds of change? As we leave behind the warmth of the desert campfire, the sounds of camel hooves softly fading into the distance, imagine yourself once again under the vast, star-filled sky. The night is cool, the wind gentle, as if the desert itself is whispering its secrets to you. You feel the soft weight of your blanket, and as you settle further into its embrace, I invite you to close your eyes and let the desert night surround you. Tonight, we move into a new chapter, one tinged with the complexities of loyalty, promises, and the inevitability of betrayal. The year is 1917, and the war is far from over. The British, led by T.E. Lawrence and supported by the Bedouins, have made significant progress in their fight against the Ottoman Empire. The once powerful Ottoman forces are in retreat, and the desert is now a battlefield. But despite the successes, there is a growing sense of unease, a feeling that things are not as they seem. The Bedouins, so fiercely independent, have begun to question their alliance with the British. The initial bond between the Bedouins and the British had been one of mutual necessity. The British needed the Bedouins to help them navigate the treacherous desert, to provide local knowledge, and to fight against the Ottomans. The Bedouins, for their part, saw the British as a means to an end, an ally who could help them achieve their long-sought goal of independence from Ottoman rule. At first, everything seemed aligned. The desert sun, now dipping below the horizon, cast a soft glow on the sand as they rode together side by side. But as the weeks turned into months, something began to shift in the air. The Bedouins, ever watchful of foreign powers, started to feel the weight of the British promises. Promises of an independent Arab state, free from the control of the Ottomans, had been made early on. But with every victory, with every step further into Ottoman territory, the Bedouins began to wonder, would the British really keep their word? Or was this alliance nothing more than a means to an end for the British Empire? It's hard to imagine the feelings that must have swept through the Bedouin leaders as they sat around the campfire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. Could they trust the British? Lawrence, who had become a trusted intermediary, was no longer enough to bridge the growing gap between the two sides. His personal connection to the Bedouins was undeniable, but it wasn't enough to erase the skepticism that had started to take root. Perhaps in the quiet of those desert nights, they asked themselves, were we just pawns in someone else's game? The Bedouins, after all, had lived for centuries by their own rules, their own codes of honor. To be manipulated, even with the best of intentions, was something they could not easily accept, and the promises of a future free from Ottoman rule began to feel more and more like a distant mirage. Let's imagine a scene. It's late evening. The desert sky is a deep, velvety blue, studded with stars. The sound of a distant camel's footfalls echoes faintly in the silence. The Bedouin leaders gather around, speaking in low tones, their robes wrapped tightly around them to ward off the coolness of the night air. Lawrence sits among them, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. His eyes scan the horizon, but his mind is elsewhere, caught between his loyalty to the British cause and his respect for the desert people he has come to love. The conversation grows tense. The British, in their pursuit of victory, have begun to push the Bedouins harder. Their leaders have begun to make subtle demands, asking the Bedouins to risk more, to push further into Ottoman territory, all for the promise of a future that seems increasingly uncertain. The Bedouins, ever cautious, begin to question their role in this larger conflict. What if the British, once the Ottomans are defeated, turn their backs on them? What if their promised independence fades into a new form of colonial rule? It is here, in these moments of doubt and questioning, that the seeds of betrayal are sown. The British, for their part, may have thought that they were keeping their promises, but the language of diplomacy is often a complex and tangled web. Lawrence, despite his best efforts, could not guarantee the future for the Bedouins. The British government, with its shifting priorities and ever-changing strategies, was not the steady ally the Bedouins had hoped for. The dream of an independent Arab state seemed to slip further and further out of reach, like the faint light of the stars above, always visible but never quite attainable. Imagine the cold night air around you, the flickering of the firelight casting shadows on the faces of those gathered. There is a palpable sense of unease. The cracks in the alliance are growing wider. The Bedouins, whose loyalty had once been strong, are now beginning to question everything. And in the silence of the desert night, you can almost hear the whispers of doubt as they spread like a slow wind. But betrayal, as we know, is often not immediate. It is a slow and creeping thing, like the change of seasons in the desert. The first signs may be subtle, an icy look, a shift in tone, a change in how one speaks of the future. And then, like the snap of a dry twig, everything shifts. The moment of betrayal is often not dramatic. It is a quiet, almost imperceptible turning away. As the days pass, the tension between the British and the Bedouins begins to rise. Lawrence, caught in the middle, tries to hold the fragile alliance together, but it is becoming more difficult. The British, desperate for results, begin to push the Bedouins harder, asking them to take more risks, to fight battles that seem more about British interests than Bedouin freedom. And the Bedouins, once allies in the desert, begin to retreat, their trust in the British slowly eroding. By 1918, the alliance between the British and the Bedouins begins to unravel. The Bedouins, feeling betrayed, begin to turn inward, focusing once again on their own survival and future. The British, for all their promises, cannot offer the independence they had once promised. The dream of a united Arab state, free from Ottoman rule and Western control, fades into the distance, leaving behind a sense of disillusionment. And so, my friends, the story of betrayal in the desert unfolds. But as we leave the flickering campfire behind, think about the weight of promises made and broken. In the vastness of the desert, trust is a rare and fragile thing, and as the Bedouins looked to the horizon, they had to ask themselves, what would their future hold? Would the British come through on their promises, or would they, like the desert itself, be abandoned to the sands of time? Let the winds of the desert carry your thoughts forward, and let us move to the next chapter of this journey. As we continue our journey under the wide, starry desert sky, imagine the quiet intensity of the night settling around you. The air is cool, the wind a soft whisper through the dunes. You can almost hear it, the ancient voice of the desert, telling tales of centuries past. Feel the weight of the blanket surrounding you, the softness of the night, and let your miktat drift with the story, carried like a gentle breeze. It's 1918 now, and the war has begun to change the course of history. The Bedouins, once allies of the British, now find themselves at a crossroads. Their loyalty, once firm and resolute, has been tested by the shifting sands of political promises. The winds of change blow strong, and the once solid ground beneath their feet now seems uncertain. T.E. Lawrence, who had once been the trusted mediator between the British and the Bedouins, feels the growing tension like a weight on his shoulders. His understanding of the desert people, his deep respect for their culture, is no longer enough to hold the fragile alliance together. The promises made to the Bedouins, promises of an independent Arab state, are slipping further from reach with each passing day. The British, focused on their own strategic interests, seem less and less interested in the Bedouins' future. Now, picture yourself once again on the edge of the desert, the cool breeze lifting the strands of your hair, the crackle of a distant fire breaking the silence. Lawrence stands among the Bedouins, his face shadowed by the uncertainty of what's to come. He knows that the relationship he's built with these desert people is faltering. The Bedouins, proud and fiercely independent, are beginning to question everything. They fought with courage, with the hope of freedom, but now the future seems unclear. And in this moment, as the winds of change swirl around them, they must decide whether to trust the British or to forge their own path. The Bedouins had long lived by their own code, free from the influence of foreign powers. They were not easily swayed by promises or military strategy. Their hearts and minds were tied to the land, the desert that had shaped them for centuries. But now, the desert had become a battlefield, and the Bedouins were caught between two competing forces, the British, offering promises of independence, and the Ottomans, who had ruled over them with a heavy hand for so long. But what had the British really promised? Lawrence, despite his genuine respect for the Bedouins, had no control over the larger forces at play. The British government had its own priorities, and those priorities did not always align with the aspirations of the Arab people. The more the Bedouins fought, the more they felt their independence slipping away. The British, who had once been their allies, now seemed like just another empire trying to carve up the Middle East for its own gain. Imagine the quiet moments in the desert, as the campfires flicker and the Bedouin leaders gather around. Their voices are low, their words heavy with the weight of betrayal. The promises of an Arab state are now distant echoes in the wind. The British had used them, and now, with the Ottomans retreating, it seemed that the Bedouins were being discarded like so much sand in the desert. Their future, once so full of possibility, now seemed bleak and uncertain. And so, the winds of change begin to blow. The Bedouins, once so certain in their loyalty to Lawrence and the British cause, now find themselves torn. They are not foolish. They know that the British may not deliver on their promises. They have seen the way history has treated the people of the desert, the way foreign powers have come and gone, leaving nothing behind but broken promises and unfulfilled dreams. The betrayal, though quiet, is like a slow-burning fire. It is not the sudden clash of armies or the loud, dramatic gestures of war. It is something quieter, something more subtle. The Bedouins, in their wisdom, begin to pull back. They stop pushing forward into Ottoman territory, wary of the British promises. The British, frustrated by the lack of progress, push harder, demanding more from their desert allies. But the Bedouins, their loyalty fading like the last light of the setting sun, begin to slip away. They no longer trust the British. They no longer believe that independence, once promised, will ever come. Lawrence, caught in the middle of this growing divide, feels the weight of this betrayal more keenly than anyone. His understanding of the Bedouins, his respect for their culture and their way of life, had always been the cornerstone of their alliance. But now, with the British demands growing stronger and the Bedouins pulling back, Lawrence is forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. The alliance is faltering, and the promises of freedom seem more like empty words than a real future. Imagine Lawrence in these quiet moments, standing in the desert, the wind lifting his coat, the stars above shining like distant witnesses to the unfolding drama. The weight of the situation presses in on him. He knows that the Bedouins, though noble and proud, are not fools. They see the writing on the wall. They know that the British, like so many before them, will leave once the war is won, and the promises of an independent Arab state will be nothing more than a distant memory. But what is the alternative? The Bedouins had no real choice but to fight. The Ottoman Empire, with its heavy-handed rule, had controlled much of the Arabian Peninsula for centuries. The British, despite their flaws, were the only viable option for the Bedouins to secure their freedom. But as the war draws to a close, it becomes clear that the British may not be the allies the Bedouins had hoped for. The future of the desert, of the Arab people, is uncertain. The betrayal is not a single moment, but a slow erosion of trust, a gradual shift in allegiance. And in the silence of the desert night, as the wind whispers through the dunes, you can almost hear the Bedouins' resolve hardening. They know that their fight is far from over. The British may have promised them freedom, but the true battle for independence will be fought by the Bedouins themselves. The British may have helped them defeat the Ottomans, but they will not be the ones to determine the future of the Arab world. As the desert night deepens, let the winds carry your thoughts forward to the next chapter of this long, winding journey. As we leave behind the murmurs of the campfire and the quiet voices of the Bedouin leaders, imagine the scene shifting smoothly like the slow, steady movement of the sands themselves. The cool desert wind rustles around us as we drift through time, moving further into the story of the Bedouins' journey. Picture yourself standing on a ridge, gazing out at the vast, unbroken desert stretching before you. The night sky, dotted with stars, is endless. You feel the weight of the land beneath your feet, the sand shifting with each step, and in the distance, a faint hum of activity stirs. It's 1917, and the Bedouins are caught between the shifting tides of war and betrayal. The British, who had once seemed like trusted allies, now seem like a distant presence, one whose promises seem less and less tangible with every passing day. But the Ottomans, though in retreat, are still very much present in the region, and the Bedouins must continue their fight. The battle for the heart of the desert is not just about the land, it's about control, about freedom, and about who will define the future of the Arabian Peninsula. For the Bedouins, the desert is both a refuge and a battlefield. They know its every secret, the way the wind can carry a scent for miles, the hidden oases that seem to appear out of nowhere, the silent, dangerous dunes that stretch for days without end. The desert is not just their home, it is their ally and their adversary. And in the fight for control, it becomes more important than ever. But as the British push for more territory, the Bedouins find themselves once again facing a difficult choice. Continue to support the British, despite the growing sense of betrayal, or strike out on their own, risking everything to secure the freedom they had once hoped for. It is a question of loyalty, a question that has no easy answer. The British, though they've made great strides with the help of the Bedouins, are beginning to grow impatient. The war in Europe is reaching its climax, and every victory in the Middle East seems to carry with it the weight of British imperial interests. For the Bedouins, however, the war is not just about defeating the Ottomans. It is about securing a future for themselves, one where they can live free from the control of any foreign power. And with each passing day, that hope seems to slip further away. Picture yourself now, standing at the edge of a desert outpost, the faint glow of a distant fire flickering in the wind. The air is still, and the stars above seem to watch over you. The tension in the air is palpable. Both sides know that something has to give. The Bedouins, though loyal to the British cause, are starting to ask themselves whether this is truly the path to their freedom. With the British pushing them harder, demanding more, the question of independence seems increasingly out of reach. The British, for their part, are under pressure. The war has drained their resources, and the strategic importance of the Middle East has only grown with each passing day. Lawrence, once a bridge between the Bedouins and the British, is now caught between two forces, one that is pushing for greater control over the desert, and the other that is pushing for their independence. The alliance, once so strong, is now on the verge of unraveling. And in the desert, where alliances are as shifting and elusive as the dunes, that unraveling is inevitable. As we move deeper into the story, think about what it must have been like for the Bedouin leaders, men and women who had fought so long and hard for their freedom, now faced with the impossible choice of whether to continue fighting for a future that may never come. The desert, as beautiful and dangerous as it is, has always been their home. But now it has become a battleground for control, for power, for the future of the entire region. The Bedouins, who had once relied on their deep knowledge of the desert to guide them through the war, are now beginning to question the very nature of their fight. They had hoped that by aligning with the British they could secure the independence they had longed for. But as the British push forward, seeking more control, that hope seems increasingly out of reach. The British, once seen as allies, now seem more like just another empire looking to carve up the desert for their own gain. In this moment of uncertainty, the Bedouins are faced with a choice that will shape their future. They must decide whether to continue supporting the British, despite the growing sense of betrayal, or to strike out on their own, risking everything to secure their freedom. It is a decision that will take them down paths they cannot yet see, paths that will lead to new challenges and, ultimately, to new alliances. Imagine, if you will, the crackle of a campfire in the distance, the faint whisper of the wind as it carries the scent of the desert. The Bedouins, standing in a circle, are deep in discussion. The British, who once seemed like the answer to their prayers, are now the source of their frustration. The promises of an independent Arab state are slipping further and further away, like the fleeting light of the stars above. It's at this moment that the Bedouins realize something important. Their fight, though it began with the British, must now be fought on their own terms. The desert, with its shifting sands and hidden dangers, will be their ally, but they will no longer be able to rely on outside powers to secure their future. The future of the Arab world, of their people, is in their hands. And so, as the fire burns low and the winds of the desert continue to blow, the Bedouins prepare to take matters into their own hands. The British may have been their allies, but they cannot be trusted to fight for their freedom. The war is not over, but the battle for the heart of the desert has shifted, and the Bedouins, though uncertain of what lies ahead, are ready to face whatever comes next. As we leave the campfire behind, let the soft breeze of the desert carry you forward into the next chapter of this journey, where the sands of time will continue to shape the destiny of the Bedouins, and where the winds of change will blow ever stronger. As the night deepens and the cool desert wind wraps around you like a soft, whispered secret, let's continue this journey. Picture the endless expanse of the desert stretching out before you, where the sands seem to stretch into eternity. The stars above shine down, quiet and steady, as if bearing witness to the unfolding story below. The weight of history hangs in the air, the soft hum of the desert becoming the steady beat of time. It's 1918, and the once solid bond between the British and the Bedouins is now crumbling. The promises of an independent Arab state made by the British to win the support of the Bedouins seem to fade further into the distance. The alliances that once seemed strong are now frail, like the sand beneath their feet. The Bedouins, whose loyalty had been given freely, are beginning to realize that they may have been misled. The British, who had promised them independence, now seem just like another foreign empire seeking to carve up the Middle East. The feeling of betrayal is heavy in the air. The Bedouins had fought alongside the British, risking their lives in raids against the Ottomans, crossing the unforgiving desert in pursuit of a shared goal. The war had cost them so much, so many lives lost, so much blood spilled. And now, the British, with their shifting priorities, are backing away from the promises they made. The once clear path to freedom has become clouded with uncertainty. Let's imagine the desert camp in the fading light of dusk. The fire crackles softly, casting flickering shadows on the faces of the Bedouin leaders. Their eyes, once filled with hope, now carry a weariness that speaks of the long road they've traveled. Around the fire, the murmurs of doubt grow louder. The British have begun to withdraw their support, focusing their efforts on Europe. The war, which had seemed to offer the promise of a new future, now feels like a distant memory. The Bedouins realize they can no longer rely on the British. The dream of an independent Arab state, once so close, now seems more like an illusion. T.E. Lawrence, the man who had once bridged the gap between the British and the Bedouins, now finds himself caught in the middle of a war he can no longer control. His respect for the desert people, his love for their culture, is no longer enough to keep the alliance intact. The Bedouins, though loyal to Lawrence, have begun to turn away from the British cause. The promises made to them seem empty, and the future they had fought for seems ever more elusive. But in the silence of the desert night, there is a deeper truth beginning to emerge. The Bedouins are no longer fighting for the British. They are fighting for their own freedom. The shifting sands of time have revealed to them that their future lies not in the hands of foreign powers, but in their own. The independence they seek, the freedom they long for, will not come through the promises of others. It will come through their own determination. Picture the scene now. The cool night air wrapping around you, the firelight dancing in the shadows. The Bedouins sit in a circle, their faces serious, their eyes resolute. They speak quietly, but with conviction. They know that their fight is far from over. The British may have been their allies, but they cannot be trusted to secure their future. The Ottomans are gone, but the real battle, the one for independence, is just beginning. Lawrence, who had spent so much of his time trying to hold the fragile alliance together, knows that the Bedouins are right. The promises of an Arab state are no longer within reach, at least not through British hands. The betrayal, though slow and subtle, has driven the Bedouins to look inward, to turn to their own resources and strength. The war against the Ottomans may be over, but the war for the future of the Arabian Peninsula is far from finished. As the fire crackles and the cool wind stirs the sand around the camp, think about the transformation taking place in the hearts of the Bedouins. They are no longer just fighters in someone else's war. They are the architects of their own future. The bonds that once tied them to the British are beginning to unravel, but in that unraveling, there is a sense of freedom. The chains of foreign promises have broken, and the Bedouins are standing tall, ready to shape their own destiny. But what does this mean for Lawrence? What does it mean for the British, whose hold over the region is beginning to slip? The world is changing, and with it, the fate of the Bedouins. They no longer need to rely on the promises of others. Their strength lies in their unity, in their shared desire for a future that is free from foreign control. As the winds blow through the desert, carrying the whispers of change, imagine the Bedouins preparing for what comes next. They are no longer fighting for the British. They are fighting for themselves. The fight for independence, for a future free from foreign powers, is just beginning. The road ahead will be difficult, but the Bedouins are ready. They have always been a people of the desert, a people shaped by the land they call home. And it is in this land, this desert of shifting sands, that they will carve out their future. Now, as we leave behind the crackling fire and the shadows of the desert camp, let the winds carry your thoughts forward. The Bedouins have made their decision. Their future is no longer tied to the British Empire. It is their own to shape, and as the story unfolds, they will face new challenges, new trials, and new opportunities. But one thing is certain, their fight is far from over. And so, we turn our gaze toward the future, where the winds of change will continue to blow, and the Bedouins will take their place in the history of the Middle East. As the final chapter of our story unfolds, imagine yourself again beneath the vast desert sky, the cool night wind brushing against your skin. The air is calm, and the stars above seem to shine even brighter, as if marking the conclusion of a long and transformative journey. The desert, eternal and unchanging, surrounds you, its endless sands stretching far into the horizon. And in this stillness there is a quiet truth, a truth that has lingered through the ages, carried by the shifting sands. The war is over, but the story of the Bedouins and their role in World War I is far from finished. As we look back on the events that brought them to this point, it's important to understand the lasting impact they had on the history of the Middle East. Their courage, their resourcefulness, and their deep connection to the land shaped the course of the war in ways that were often overlooked, but no less significant. The Bedouins may not have fought in the grand battles of Europe, but their contributions were just as vital to the outcome of the conflict. In the aftermath of the war, as the Ottoman Empire dissolved and the Middle East was redrawn by new powers, the Bedouins were left to face a future that was uncertain. The promises made to them by the British, the hope of an independent Arab state, had faded into the background, overshadowed by the geopolitical realities of the post-war world. The British, having achieved their military objectives, began to withdraw, leaving the Bedouins to navigate the complex political landscape of the new Middle East on their own. But the Bedouins, for all their struggles and betrayals, were not defeated. The spirit of independence that had guided them through the war remained unbroken. Their fight for freedom had not been won on the battlefields, but it had been won in the hearts and minds of the people. The lessons of the desert, of survival, resilience, and self-reliance, continued to shape the Bedouins as they moved forward into the new world. Imagine the quiet stillness of the desert once more. The firelight has dimmed, and the sounds of the night are soothing, distant, and calm. The Bedouins, though no longer at war, continue to live as they always have. Their lives, intertwined with the desert, are lived with the same courage and determination that carried them through the darkest days of the war. They are not just survivors, they are a testament to the strength of the human spirit, to the power of resilience in the face of uncertainty. The legacy of the Bedouins, though not written in the grand history books of empires, is woven into the fabric of the Middle East. Their role in World War I, though often overlooked, was instrumental in shaping the course of the region. Without their knowledge of the desert, their resourcefulness, and their bravery, the outcome of the war might have been very different. They may not have won the independence they were promised, but they played a pivotal role in the larger struggle for freedom and self-determination. As the years passed and the world moved on, the Bedouins continued to live as they always had, roaming the desert in search of freedom, survival, and a future of their own making. Their story, though often overshadowed by the larger events of history, remains a quiet but powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of the human spirit. The Bedouins, in their own way, shaped the future of the Middle East, and their legacy endures in the land they call home. Now, as the desert winds carry the soft whispers of time, we reflect on the journey we've taken together. The story of the Bedouins in World War I is a tale of loyalty, betrayal, courage, and resilience. It is a story of people who, though often overlooked, played a crucial role in shaping the course of history. And as we sit beneath the vast sky, with the cool wind at our backs and the stars above, we carry with us the quiet strength of the Bedouins, their legacy etched into the sands of time. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams, my friends. If this calm journey helped you unwind, let me know below. Sweet dreams. Good night.